All right, we're back. Here we are, NSCA chapter 19, and we're now going into presentation 3, which is specific to exercise concerns of clients who are overweight or obese. And I kind of hit on this a little bit before in terms of what is appropriate and what is something that is appropriate for a person who is obese or overweight. Considerations, you have to give consideration to the fact that the person might be heat intolerant. It'd be difficult for them to move around, they'll overheat. You need to be kind of aware of environmental situations and concerns, how warm the room is. Is it humid? Are you going to go outside in the summer sun or not? Do they have movement restrictions? Are they able to get up and get down? Can they get onto a piece of equipment and get off? For individuals who are obese, all that weight has to basically go on their feet, and they might have some weight bearing issues and some orthopedic concerns. As a result of the extra body weight, they might have some low back problems and also some low back pain and posture problems. Balance might be an issue, and I will say this: as people go through the curve of losing weight, they're kind of like relearning what their body is, and have to go through kind of like a kinesthetic awareness process to kind of figure out their body. And then when you look at dyspnea and hyperpenia, we're talking about breathing issues related to being obese. Uh, we talked about the difference between obesity and overweight and that threshold at, 30 for the BMI. And, these folks are carrying around a bunch of extra weight. In some regards, it's like taking one of you and having somebody climb on your back and you're carrying that person around all day. And so as a result, it's an excess load that's placed on the structure, and also all of the systems in the body have to be able to function to be able to service that individual. And it's just a ton of work for them to get around every day. It really is. Now, on the heat intolerant side, um, they know it's kind of like an extra insulating layer. The tissue itself, causes some challenges in their ability to thermoregulate. And some things you may need to do, perhaps either train indoors in a controlled environment, perhaps work in a pool if the temperature of the water is appropriate, and then also work at lower intensities if, in fact, it's just too hot and you can't find any other way to work out. And they also note that the personal trainer can encourage the client to wear more loose-fitting clothes when they get into hotter temperatures. Now, you will see some clients, they want to come in, they want to almost like wear a sweatsuit, like sweating suit you'd see in wrestling to lose weight, but that's just water weight. That's not fat weight. So it doesn't help them and actually causes more problems than it solves. And um, movement patterns themselves for individuals, you're talking about people where they may have to just, you may have to work with them just to pick something up off of the floor and stand back up because they're not accustomed to doing that type of work. And their balance, as we'll talk about, is kind of a challenge for them as well. So the adipose tissue itself, it might limit their movement patterns, and they might not be able to go through a full range of motion comfortably. And so when you talk about asking somebody to get on or off a piece of exercise equipment or try to lay down on a bench and get back up, that could be really a challenge for them. And you may have to make some decisions regarding what pieces of equipment you'll put your client on or maybe not put on if it might be too challenging for them to get in or out. So to a certain degree, you have to make some decisions at the game time, right, to be able to determine what you want to do with your client and be able to have an understanding of what pieces of equipment are going to be appropriate for your client. With high BMI people, these like 40 plus BMI, people who are like more than 400 pounds, it's a lot of load on the joints. And, you have to find ways to work with your clients to understand and get them to understand that low impact is your friend. I mean, anything that they do is actually high impact because of the amount of body mass that they're carrying around. But so you want them to get to work, but you don't want to have them do so at the peril of, say, orthopedic or muscular injuries, right? You want them to be able to get to work, but you don't want to injure them. That's kind of like your main walking papers here. Give them the work, but don't injure them. So for these individuals, you don't have to handle them with like kid gloves and and be super cautious. Just realize they carry around a lot of weight all day long, so their capacity to do work is quite high. But you just have to be smart about how you implement the work as to not exacerbate other injuries that might come about. You can just think of in terms of a person has sizable amount of adipose tissue on their lower body, their legs, the circumference of their legs are larger. And so as a result, when they walk, they actually have to circumduct their legs a little bit, causes a little bit of a swish in the hips. And their foot strike is probably on the outside edge of their foot, causing more inversion as opposed to being in neutral stance. So just like little things, you start to evaluate your client to see how the adipose tissue has changed either the range of motion or particular movement patterns, or perhaps how it might cause some other issues orthopedic in their life, other orthopedic issues in their lives. They talk about posture and low back pain, and they highlight this. They talk about the stress of abdominal fat on the spine, and usually individuals just won't have the strength in their midsection to be able to be strong enough to stand up and have the extra body weight and not cause problems in the low back. So you'll have like a lower dotted curve in the back that might be excessive. And then, you have perhaps kyphosis up in the shoulder region. And, you look at these different postural changes. As you work with individuals and you take them through weight loss, you may have to re-educate them on how to stand correctly and have good posture. And you may have to re-educate them on what muscles they need to actually fire to actually stand erect, because they have been standing so long with so much extra weight on the system that now you're taking the weight off. You need to teach them how to have good posture. It just takes time to re-educate and introduce in exercises for the midsection. It sounds kind of silly. We're not so worried about the person having ripped abs and we're trying to lose, 100 pounds of adipose tissue, but there's a functional component to having strength in the midsection so that person can function effectively. With balance, the adipose tissue, when we talk about people walking, as I mentioned before, they usually circumduct when they walk. They also may have a little bit of abduction and external rotation. And you're going to have a little bit more stress on the lateral aspect of the ankles because they're walking more on like the fifth metatarsal on that outside edge of the foot. And it's a little bit kind of quirky in terms of you have to get people to understand good foot position and kind of like re-educate them regarding their own kinesthetic awareness of where their body is. And so for those clients, they don't have an understanding of their own K awareness. And as you take them through a weight loss program, as they lose weight, they're basically re-educating themselves on what their body is over and over and over, week to week to week. It's a lot like a young client who comes in and each week they get a growth spurt and you have to re-educate them regarding their body. It's the same thing. It's the same process. You have to re-educate your clients. And so to a certain degree, balance training or even functional type training on a regular basis for your client is very appropriate and of benefit to your client. With both hyperpenia and dyspnea, you have an increased rate of respiration, and you have labored or difficult breathing. So often with folks who are obese, you have individuals who just have difficulty sleeping. They have sleep apnea. They have difficult breathing because of the adipose tissue. And so you have to understand, and when people come in to work out with you, not only do they have to work super hard to like service all the systems in the body while they're working out and the workloads are exacerbated by their body weight, but also you may have some increase in the respiratory and the respiration rate, excuse me, and then you also may have some just difficult labored breathing as a result of the mechanics of their lungs and also just their body carrying extra body weight. When you start off, individuals can do more continuous type activity at lower intensity, and you can ramp up that intensity as you go. But the book suggests that you use an RPE type scale so you have an understanding of what is appropriate, what is hard, what is easy. And, you can kind of manipulate your rep and set combinations or your work rest ratios, depending what activity we're talking about, and use RPE as a way to evaluate their workload. All right, so I'm going to break off from that and I'm going to go feed my dogs. Thanks, guys.